This hurts having to say this as a realtor, but you might seriously regret buying a house right now. I know it sucks having to pay these high rental prices, but did you know it's actually cheaper to rent a house right now instead of buy? I'll break that down later in the video, so make sure to watch to the very end. There are just way too many variables going on right now with the real estate industry, with the housing market, and especially this NAR settlement. There's a very high chance you're going to regret buying a house this year, so let me explain why. And I bet you never thought you'd have a realtor tell you that you shouldn't buy a house. Listen, you can do what you want, but this housing market is creating a really big challenge for everybody, and you might lose a tremendous amount of money if you do decide to buy. So I'm going to let you all know when the right time to buy is going to be. Real estate is a long-term investment, but not in this economic climate. In this video, we're going to talk about all the elephants in the room, and trust me, there are a lot of them. First off, it makes a tremendous difference which region of the country that you're actually in. Are you in the southern United States? Are you in the Northeast or the Midwest? There's two completely opposite trends going on depending on the region that you live in. So let's first talk about the southern states and the northern states and what you should do depending on where you live. In Texas and Florida, there are 249,000 homes for sale. But in the Northeast, there's only 90,000 homes. And what you need to know is that prior to the pandemic, Texas and Florida had the exact same inventory as the entire Northeast combined. But now there's this massive gap showing just how divided this market has become. The rising inventory is causing prices to go down in southern states like Texas and Florida. Homes in these southern states are now 40% more overvalued compared to its long-term pricing forecast, meaning that homes are sitting on the market even longer and prices are coming down month after month. But the opposite is happening in northern states like New York and New Jersey, and even in the Midwest. Inventory in these states is still far too low, as you can see from these graphs that are up on the screen. See, there's not enough houses, which is causing the prices to actually go up. Houses are selling in days. We're still having bidding wars, and people are paying over 6 figures over asking price. Buyers are still having to do appraisal gaps and waive inspections, which is exactly what we saw in Florida a few years ago. But those days are long gone in my Florida market. However, this is still happening in northern states like the tri-state area. We're now seeing states like Texas and Florida in the south start to recover from these record high prices. So now, if you had bought a house during the peak back in 2022, you've probably lost a tremendous amount of money if you're gonna sell. That would make you think buying a house right now, if you're in the south, is a good idea. But we're still about 40% overvalued, and our inventory is about 17% less than the pre-pandemic levels. That means that prices haven't caught up with the amount of inventory that is in these southern states. So I expect them to drop by another 10 to 20% in price over the next year or two. If you're in one of these southern states that are seeing increasing inventory and declining prices, I believe that 2026 will actually be the best time to buy a house. However, for northern states like New York, it's a completely different story. Since high prices and low inventory is mirroring what we saw in southern states in 2022, you could expect those northern markets to peak in about 6 to 12 months. So the time to buy in these northern states is most likely going to be around 2028, once prices have come down to match the higher inventory. You need to give it a couple years to have sellers realize that the price of their home is not what it used to be, so they finally start lowering their home prices. I believe northern and midwestern states are about 2 years behind all of the southern states. Keep in mind, this all depends on what the Fed does with interest rates. And listen, if you want to jump into buying a house right now, knock yourself out. If you plan on staying there for more than 10 years, you're not going to lose money. 10 years is about the break-even point when you compare renting a house to buying a house right now. Instead of putting that 20% down payment down and buying a house, you could then rent a house and then take that down payment and invest it into an index fund like Vanguard, VOO. Because remember, it's actually cheaper to rent right now, which I'm going to talk about in a moment and break down some numbers for you. So if you're going to be buying right now and putting yourself in situations where you're waiving appraisals, you're not doing inspections, and you're having to overbid on a house, you're going to seriously regret it. Then, as you see prices start to plummet, you're going to regret it even more, because now that house you just bought a few years prior is worth less than what you paid for it. Think of it like this. Prices are coming down in southern states, and they'll continue to drop over the next couple of years. Prices are slowly going up for northern states, but they're about to peak, and then the prices are going to come down in the following years. So either way you look at it, buying now in either area is not a great idea. And a big reason why is those interest rates. Here we are in Q4 and we still have not had a single rate drop yet. Jerome Powell just came out and said that he's going to drop rates at some point this year, but refuses to say by how much and when. They raised interest rates due to inflation because they're targeting a 2% inflation rate, yet we're hovering around 3%. That's why the nation's top economists say that they're going to keep the interest rates around 2.5%, which is the federal funds rate, and that is actually the Goldilocks zone, until the end of 2026. And let me tell you guys something, there is no national mortgage rate. There's the federal funds rate, which semi-dictates what happens with the mortgage rates. And these mortgage rates are hovering around 7% right now. Now, I know you guys that bought homes in the 70s and the 80s and you paid 18% are laughing at us saying, oh my God, 7%, that's a bargain. It's challenging now because prices are comically high for no reason at all. What used to cost $300,000 for a simple, no-frills, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family house now cost upwards of and sometimes more than $600,000. It's truly disgusting what happened to this housing market. Now, if you absolutely must get into a house right now, there are a few options. You can buy points to reduce your mortgage rate, but that does come at a cost. You could also try things like seller financing or subject to, so you can assume the seller's low interest rate. However, you're going to need to find a really savvy real estate agent or a really good attorney. And the other thing you can consider is refinancing at a later date when the mortgage rates do finally drop in a few years, but you're going to have to eat the high monthly payment costs in the meantime. So you might be thinking, why are they keeping interest rates high? How about if you just drop the interest rates? Wouldn't that solve all the problems? Unfortunately, no. That will not solve any problems. Actually, it'll just make things worse because the Fed fears that if they start dropping interest rates too soon, it's going to cause the prices of homes to go up and trigger a frenzy of buyers to enter the market. So I can absolutely see why they put a pause on lowering the interest rates. And realistically, you shouldn't want them to lower them either. It will seriously screw the market up even worse than it is right now, and we're finally entering the recovery phase in some areas. Now, another reason why you could regret buying right now is overpaying for a house in an overvalued market. As I just told you before, in states like New Jersey and New York, prices are still ridiculously high for homes, and there's a huge risk for home buyers that you do not want to overpay. And trust me, if you buy a house right now, that's exactly what you're going to be doing. It's a huge risk. So if you buy a house right now for, let's say, $700,000, and in a couple years, the price of the home goes back down to, let's say, $400,000 or maybe $500,000, you've just lost a tremendous amount of money in a very, very short amount of time. Before you panic and say, oh my God, what do? I just bought a house. Don't worry about it. As long as you keep your job and you can still make your monthly payments, you'll be okay. You're just gonna have to wait it out. Over the years, we've seen dips in the housing market and it always goes back up. Remember, real estate is a long-term investment. So just keep paying off your mortgage and eventually you'll gain equity in the house and it will start to rise again. But if you're buying a house right now just to sell it in the next couple years, yeah, that's a terrible idea. I would not do that. So say you bought a house right now with, let's say, a 7 or 8% mortgage, and then you go and try to refinance in a couple years after the market went down. That's going to be a huge challenge because now your home is worth less than what you paid for. And if it becomes less than what you owe, that's another huge risk as well. So just think about that, because that's another reason why you might regret buying a house right now. Look, nobody can predict the real estate market. Nobody can predict the stock market. Everything's going to be a little bit of a risk. Just make sure that you do not sell the house. But if you happen to lose your job and you can't make that monthly payment anymore, that could be an issue. So you're going to have to talk to your loan officer and talk about doing some kind of forbearance or a loan modification just so you can keep the home. But if you're going to turn around and try to do a short sale, yeah, you're going to lose a ton of money. Okay, now this topic has been all over the news. It's the settlement with the National Association of Realtors. I actually made a deep dive video on this, so I'm going to link it at the end. I'll just give a brief rundown right now though. So if you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard about this news yet, buyers are going to have to sign a buyer-broker agreement just to see a house right now. That buyer-broker agreement that you sign with your agent is going to set the fee, if it's exclusive or not. This way, you'll know how much you're paying your agent before you even step foot into a showing. However, if the sellers aren't willing to pay a concession to you that you then pay to your buyer's agent, you're going to have to pay the commission out of your own pocket. Okay, so a little bonus tip here. Since I'm telling you guys to wait and not buy a house right now, then what should you do? Well, number one, if you're renting, just continue to rent. I I know in some markets rent prices are coming down, and other markets they're actually going up. But either way, remember how I said earlier it's actually cheaper to rent a house instead of buy? Well, as an example, let's say you buy a house in Florida for $500,000. Your all-in monthly payment is going to hover around $4,000 per month if you put around 20% down. Well, you can rent that exact same $500,000 home for about $3,000 a month, meaning you're going to save $1,000 every single month renting the same equivalent house instead of buying it. That's going to vary per area, but that's a general rule of thumb right now. So that's another reason why you might regret buying right now, because you could actually save money by renting a house. If you have any credit card debt or car loans or student loans or medical bills, just start paying that down because you'll actually qualify for a lower interest rate the better that your credit gets. Another thing to do while you're saving your money is make your money work for you. So instead of putting 20% down on a house, take that money and put it into, let's say, a CD or possibly a security. Or if you want to get really risky, put it into an index fund. But those are really expensive right now. So that's going to be better for long-term investing. However, interest rates are pretty good for treasury securities and CDs, and that can be a quicker investment. I would seriously consider doing that. But you always have to talk to your financial advisor. Really build up your savings while you live below your means so you can start stacking as much money as you can to get ready to buy a home. I'm sure you're shocked that I'm telling you this as a realtor that you're going to regret buying a house. But I really hope this information helps you if you've been on the fence about buying a home this year. And if you like this video, click on this video above to learn about the NAR settlement. And if you already know about the NAR settlement, click on this video so when you do buy a house, these are the type of houses never to buy.